What if a stray cat only appeared when someone was about to die? Dive into the haunting world of The Cat with Crimson Eyes, a full-length horror story about a cursed village, blood-red rain, and a creature wearing the skin of a feline. This isn't just a story. It's a nightmare that watches from the shadows. Chapter 1. The First Death. The first death came quietly. Mrs. Elkins had been a fixture in the village of Greystone Hollow for nearly 70 years. A widowed piano teacher with a sharp tongue and sharper hearing. She lived alone in a decaying 2-story house at the corner of Wren Street. Her shutters were always half closed. Her chimney smoked at odd hours. And neighborhood children whispered stories about the strange music that sometimes drifted from her attic at midnight. On the morning of September 3rd, her body was found seated in her parlor chair, head tilted back, mouth slightly open as if caught mid-sentence. No signs of struggle. No trauma. Just an old woman whose time had quietly run out. The coroner listed her cause of death as natural, but it didn't feel natural. Ethan Morrigan, 17 years old and newly returned from boarding school, was one of the first to hear the whispers. He'd grown up in Greystone Hollow before his parents sent him away, and now, back for his final year, the town felt off, too quiet, too watchful. That night, as darkness crept over the village like a slow tide, Ethan stood by his window, overlooking the narrow alley between his house and the one next door. The air was thick with early autumn chill, the kind that carried the scent of dying leaves and damp earth. The trees rustled faintly in the breeze, their skeletal branches brushing against one another with a dry, papery sound. Then he heard it. Scree, scree, scree! A faint scraping noise, like claws dragging against old stone. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, nose nearly touching the glass. At first, there was only the shifting dark, but then movement. Something slinked into view. It was a cat. At least, that's what it resembled, feline in shape, lean and almost spectral in its silence. Its fur was jet black, blending into the night like spilled ink, but its eyes, two burning crimson orbs, glowing like coals in a dying fire. Ethan froze. The cat turned its head toward him. Their gazes locked. His heart skipped. He didn't breathe. The cat didn't move. It just stared, unblinking, unmoving, before slowly walking along the alley, its crimson eyes not once leaving his. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished into shadow. The scraping sound faded. Ethan staggered back from the window, pulse thudding in his ears. He tried to laugh it off. It's just a cat, just a weird-looking stray. But deep down, he felt something coil in his stomach. Not fear exactly, but dread, slow and sticky. The next day, Mrs. Elkins was laid to rest in the village cemetery. A modest affair attended by the pastor, a few elderly neighbors, and Clarabelle, a girl Ethan hadn't seen since 3rd grade. She stood alone near the back of the service, arms crossed, face unreadable. Her eyes flicked up briefly, and for a moment they met his. She didn't smile. Later, as the sky dimmed to a hazy gray and the mist rolled in from the woods, Ethan found himself wandering toward the Elkins house. The front gate was ajar, creaking slightly in the wind. Creak. He stepped through. The garden was wild, overgrown with tangled vines and dead flowers. Fallen leaves crunched beneath his shoes. The house loomed above him like a sleeping giant, its windows dark and blind. Then came the sound again. Scree, 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 from somewhere within. He stepped up to the porch, heart pounding. The door, nailed shut that morning, now hung slightly open. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. My curiosity, or something deeper, pulled him in. The interior was dark, the air stale and cold. Dust coated the furniture like ash. A grand piano stood in the center of the parlor, its lid half open, keys exposed like teeth. And on top of it sat the cat. Crimson eyes glowing, body still as stone. Ethan choked back a gasp. The cat blinked, slow and deliberate. Then, plink! One of the piano keys moved. Plink, plonk, another. The cat's paw was on the keys. It was playing. He couldn't move, couldn't even think. Scream! Thump! A sudden loud bang echoed from upstairs, like furniture being overturned. Ethan spun toward the staircase, eyes wide. Then came the whisper. Get out. He bolted. Out the door, down the steps, through the gate. He didn't stop running until he reached his front porch, lungs burning, hands trembling. That night, he dreamed of eyes, red, glowing, watching him from every shadow. The next morning, the town woke to news. Clara's dog had died without injury, without warning. Just stopped breathing. She'd found it curled at the foot of her bed, eyes open in frozen terror. The village doctor could offer no explanation. She's cursed, someone muttered at the local diner. First the old woman, now the girl's pet. That thing, that cat, its death made flesh. No one laughed. Over the next few days, Ethan saw the cat again, always at night. Always after a scream in the distance or a knock on a neighbor's door bearing bad news. Its crimson eyes would glow from rooftops, alleys, even once perched atop the village chapel's iron gate. The sound of claws scraping across tile or wood became as common as the tolling bell of grief. Scree, 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 every night. He tried to ask Clara about it, but she avoided him. Until Thursday. She found him near the woods. I saw it, she said without preamble. The night my dog died, it was sitting at the foot of my bed. I didn't dream it. Her voice trembled. It looked at me, and I swear to God, Ethan, it smiled. That evening, Ethan sat at his desk, scribbling everything he could remember. The scraping noises, the glowing eyes, the piano, Clara's warning. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the old window panes. Howl. Tap, tap, tap. He paused. The sound came again. Tap, tap. He turned toward the window, slowly. Two red eyes stared back from the other side of the glass. Then the glass cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough to send him stumbling back in terror. Ethan didn't sleep that night, and the next morning the baker's wife was found dead in her kitchen, surrounded by shattered glass and claw marks on the floor. No signs of entry. ... No signs of struggle. But there were witnesses. A child across the street said he saw a black cat on the windowsill staring in, with eyes like fire. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Alley. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd heard the village so silent. It was the kind of quiet that crept under door frames and behind curtains, the kind that settled into bones like cold mist. Even the crows that perched atop the steeple of Greystone Hollow's chapel seemed subdued, their wings tucked tightly, their beady eyes alert. The usual morning chatter at the bakery had dimmed into murmurs. No laughter, no idle gossip. Only whispers. And the whispers spoke of death. The death of Mrs. Elkins was now joined by that of Judith Marsh, the baker's wife. 2 deaths, 1 week apart. Both sudden, both inexplicable, and both accompanied by the appearance of the cat with crimson eyes. Ethan walked to school that morning with his hood drawn tight, trying to ignore the feeling that something was following him. The alley beside Hollow Street, the one where he'd first seen the creature, seemed darker than usual. Damp, as though it had rained there and nowhere else. Scree, scree, scree! That sound again, faint, barely audible, like claws dragging against brick. He turned quickly. Nothing there, just trash bins and a crooked fence swaying gently in the wind. He walked faster. In class, he sat beside Clara. She looked even paler than the day before, shadows under her eyes like bruises. "Did you hear about Judith Marsh?" he whispered. She didn't look up. Everyone did. "They're saying it was the cat, again." Now she turned, slowly. Her voice was lower than a breath. "Ethan, something is wrong with this village." He nodded. "I know. I can feel it." She hesitated, then said, "It's not just a cat." "What do you mean?" She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "My grandmother told me a story once before she passed, about a spirit that takes the form of a black animal, a harbinger. It appears after death, but not as a witness, as a collector." Ethan frowned. "A collector of what?" "Souls." That night, the whispers began. Ethan first heard them while brushing his teeth, faint voices like murmured conversation through thin walls. He paused, toothbrush frozen mid-motion. "Not yet. It's watching." He turned off the tap. The voices stopped. Cautiously, he crept to the hallway. His parents were downstairs, the TV on low. No one else was upstairs. Then it came again, only this time clearer. "Don't feed it. Don't speak to it. Don't look into its eyes." The voice was raspy, like dry leaves crumbling underfoot. "Hello," he called out, voice shaking. Silence. Then thump. A sudden bang from the attic. His skin prickled. The sound echoed through the ceiling like something heavy had been dropped. He didn't go up. The following day, news spread of a 3rd death. Eli Tanner, a reclusive artist who lived at the edge of town, was found slumped over his easel, face twisted in fear. His paintbrush was still clutched in his hand. Streaks of black and red smeared across the canvas. On the canvas, was a painting. A black cat with glowing red eyes. Behind it, a sea of faceless, screaming shadows. Clara found Ethan in the library during lunch. "There's something else," she said. "My grandmother kept a journal. I found it last night." He leaned in. "What did it say?" "She called it the Crimson Shadow. She said it marked a place once every generation. A curse left behind by someone who made a deal with death. Every time it returns, people die. Always in threes at first." Ethan swallowed. "And then?" She didn't answer. That evening, Ethan decided to investigate the alley. It was narrow, damp, and half choked with vines and mildew. The smell of rot clung to the brick like an old wound. He stepped cautiously, his flashlight slicing through the dark. The beam caught something in the distance. A figure? No, just a pile of trash. Then the whisper came again. "Ethan." His name. Soft, drawn out, a voice he didn't recognize. He spun around. No one. Then screech ash, thud. Something slammed into the alley wall behind him. He turned his light in time to see a blur of black movement vanish into the darkness. His heart pounded in his chest. "Meow! Meow!" The scream of a cat, low, guttural, wrong. It echoed off the walls, reverberating in his skull. He ran. Later, as he sat trembling on his bed, his phone buzzed. It was Clara. "Come outside. Now!" He found her standing near the woods, holding a small, tattered book. "My grandmother's journal," she said. "There's a page you need to see." She opened it. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic. "When the crimson-eyed beast returns, the dead will no longer rest. You'll hear them first in whispers, then in screams. Don't answer the voices in the alley. They're not who they seem to be." Ethan looked up at her. "The whispers." She nodded. "I heard them too." A rustling in the trees made them both jump. Then a hiss, long, piercing. They turned. There, 10 feet away, crouched in the tall grass, the cat. Its body was still. Its eyes burned. And then, for the first time, it spoke. Not with words, but with a sound that mimicked a human voice, warped, like a recording played backward. "Join us, us." Ethan's knees buckled. Clara screamed. The cat lunged forward, but only for a split second, and vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving only the echo of its twisted voice behind. That night, no one in Greystone Hollow slept. More people reported hearing whispers. One woman swore she saw her dead husband standing at the foot of her bed, mouth stitched shut, pointing toward the window. When she looked outside, she saw the cat, sitting calmly on her fence, watching, always watching. Ethan stayed awake until dawn, journal in hand, pages filled with desperate scrawls, names, times, sounds, and sketches of the cat. He looked at the last line he'd written before falling asleep. "If it kills in threes, then someone else will die." At exactly 4:14 a.m., a scream cut through the village like a knife, not an ordinary scream. A blood-curdling shriek that tore through windows woke birds from their nests and sent dogs howling. Ethan sat bolt upright in bed. The scream was followed by a sound like dragging chains and frantic knocking. He ran to his window. In the fog outside, barely visible through the pale light of the street lamp, was the cat. It sat in the middle of the road, tail coiled neatly, staring up at him. Its eyes burned brighter than ever, and around its paws a pool of blood that hadn't been there moments before. Chapter 3. Red Eyes at the Window. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke with a start, drenched in cold sweat, breath shallow, hands trembling. His room was dark. The curtains fluttered softly in the early dawn breeze, and the air smelled of something metallic, like rusted iron. Or blood. He glanced at the clock. 4:57 a.m. It was the scream that had woken him. He was sure of it. That same bone-chilling, throat-tearing shriek that had torn through Greystone Hollow just an hour ago. But now, silence. A silence so deep it roared. He sat up slowly, spine aching from the rigid position he'd slept in. His journal was still clutched in his lap, open to the page from the night before. If it kills in threes, then someone else will die. He shivered. From the corner of his room, something creaked. Creak. He turned sharply toward the sound, eyes straining in the dim light. It was just his old wooden desk chair, empty, or so he thought, because just above the chair, on the outside of the second-floor window, two glowing red eyes stared back at him. His heart stopped. He couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. The eyes didn't move. They hovered just inches beyond the glass, unblinking, unwavering, radiating a light that seemed to burn directly into his brain. Then came the tapping. Tap, tap, tap. A single paw, slow and deliberate, scratched across the glass. The sound was delicate, like a whisper, but behind it was a weight, a pressure that made the bones in Ethan's arms ache. He scrambled out of bed and backed against the opposite wall, his breathing ragged, eyes never leaving the window. The tapping grew louder. Tap, tap, tap! Each strike deeper, harder. The glass began to fracture, spiderwebbing outward from where the claw pressed. Crack! And then, as suddenly as it come, it stopped. The red eyes vanished. There was no leap, no movement, just gone, as if swallowed by the darkness itself. Ethan collapsed to the floor, heartbeat thundering in his ears like war drums. Later that morning, the village woke to another death. Gordon Wills, the old postmaster, was found face down in his garden, surrounded by torn-up earth and broken ceramic gnomes. His face was frozen in terror, mouth open in a silent scream. Fingers clawed into the soil, as if trying to dig his way out of something unseen. There were scratches on the doorframe of his back porch. 4 deep gouges, cat-sized, but too deep, too violent. And there were no paw prints, no tracks, just crimson smears on the garden stones. Clara met Ethan behind the chapel that afternoon. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her hands were shaking. "You saw it again," she said. Ethan nodded. At the window. It was staring at me. Clara swallowed hard. "It's choosing now, watching." He leaned closer. "Why us? Why always us?" "I think," she hesitated, I think we're the only ones who see it for what it is. Everyone else, they're blind. It only shows its true form to those who are marked. Marked? She rolled up her sleeve. There, just above her elbow, were 3 thin scratches, faint but red, fresh. Last night, she whispered, I woke up to a sound in my room, like whispering. Then something brushed past me in the dark. When I turned the light on, these were there. Ethan stared, horrified. Clara, it's inside your house? She nodded, and I don't think it left. That evening, Ethan and Clara decided to go to the library archives, hoping for anything that could explain the cat's origins. The town's history section was buried in the basement, behind a rusted metal gate that hadn't been opened in years. The smell hit them first: mold, paper, and something older: decay. They found a folder marked Folklore and Superstition, Greystone Hollow, 1883 to 1920. Inside, yellowed pages, brittle to the touch. One entry made Ethan stop cold. A cat with eyes like blood was said to haunt the village after the fire of 1894. It came each time a soul departed. 3 deaths, then silence, then 3 more. Always in groups of 3. No one ever saw it move. But it left marks. Always scratches on the doors. Always red eyes at the window. Clara looked up, face pale. It's happened before, Ethan whispered, and it's happening again. They turned the page, another passage. Those who dream of it are cursed. The dreams mark the soul, and once marked, you cannot hide. The crimson eyes will find you. It does not come for the body. It comes for the soul left behind. A sudden loud bang echoed through the library. Bang! Bang! They both jumped, books scattering. Footsteps fast, shuffling, not human, echoed above them. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence. The old light flickered overhead. Buzz, flick, buzz. Clara grabbed Ethan's arm. We need to leave. Now! They ran. That night, Ethan locked every door, every window, every crack in his room. But the whispers came anyway. It's waiting. It's here at the window. He covered his ears. Then he heard it, a different sound. A long, slow creaking. The sound of his bedroom door opening by itself. He turned. No one there. But the floorboards creaked as if something padded silently across them. He tried to scream, but his voice failed. Then, from the shadows, a shape emerged. Low, feline, familiar. The cat. Its red eyes glowed brighter than ever. It sat at the foot of his bed. Then it spoke again in that warped, backward whisper voice. You're next. Chapter 4. The Third Funeral. Rain fell like whispered warnings. It started just before dawn, a light drizzle that tapped against the windows like skeletal fingers. By midday, it had thickened into a relentless gray sheet, smearing the village in hues of gloom. The funeral was scheduled for 1 o'clock. The third one. Ethan stood at his bedroom window, watching mourners drift toward the chapel beneath umbrellas and hoods. A sea of black moved down the path, heads bowed, voices hushed. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone knew. This wasn't just another death. It was the third. Mrs. Elkins, Judith Marsh, and now Gordon Wills. The rule of 3s had been fulfilled. Something ancient and unspeakable had been set into motion. Behind Ethan, the clock ticked loudly. Tick, tick, tick. Each second fell like a countdown. Inside the chapel, the air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked coats, wax candles, and fresh soil. The organ sat silent in the corner, keys dusted with age. Clara was already seated at the back pew, her eyes hollow, her umbrella dripping onto the stone floor. Ethan slipped in beside her. "Heard anything?" he whispered. She nodded. "Last night, the voice came again. This time, it was inside my mirror." He shivered. "What did it say?" Clara didn't look at him. "It told me to run." At the front of the chapel, the pastor adjusted his collar and stepped forward. His voice echoed slightly in the high ceiling space. "We gather to remember the life of Gordon Wills." Scrape. Everyone flinched. The sound came from the side wall, long and sharp, like nails dragged across stone. Eyes darted. Murmurs rose. The pastor paused, visibly shaken. Ethan turned to Clara. "Did you hear that?" She didn't answer. She was staring toward the narrow chapel window, one partially fogged by the rain. There, barely visible through the misted glass, were two red, glowing eyes, staring in, watching. Clara grabbed Ethan's arm. "It's here!" After the funeral, Ethan and Clara didn't go home. They followed the procession to the cemetery, standing at the edge of the gathering. The rain turned the soil to mud, sucking at their shoes. The coffin was lowered, the final prayer muttered. But just as the first handful of dirt was tossed into the grave, the wind shifted. A deep, howling gust rolled through the trees like a cry of something ancient and enraged. Then came the sound of claws on stone. Scree, scree, scree. Everyone turned. The black cat stood atop a nearby gravestone, its crimson eyes blazing, its fur rippling despite the rain. It didn't move, didn't blink. A child screamed, people gasped, stepping back. And then, as if reality itself hiccuped, the cat was gone. No one saw it leave. It simply ceased to exist in that moment, like a thought forgotten mid-sentence. Clara whispered, "Did you see where it went?" "No," Ethan said, "but I think it doesn't go anywhere. It just is." Back at Ethan's house, he and Clara dried off and huddled in his room with his notebook, her grandmother's journal, and a growing collection of clippings, sketches, and scribbled thoughts. "We're missing something," Ethan muttered. "The curse, the threes, what comes next?" Clara traced a passage in the journal with her finger. "Once 3 souls fall, the mark is sealed. The crimson eyes will no longer wait at the window. It enters now. It walks among the living, unseen by most, but felt by all. Shadows will deepen, time will bend, and the marked must act or perish." She looked up. "It's not done." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "You think it's hunting more people?" Clara shook her head. "No, I think now it's choosing." That night, the wind returned. It howled down chimneys and slipped beneath doorframes, carrying with it the scent of rot and wet stone. The power flickered twice before giving out entirely. Ethan lit candles and sat in the corner of his room, wrapped in blankets, listening to the house creak and moan like a dying beast. Then he heard the footsteps. Not heavy, not loud, but wrong, deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. They came from the attic above. Ethan reached for the baseball bat beneath his bed, gripping it tightly. Creak. The attic hatch creaked open by itself. The rope ladder slithered down like a tongue. He didn't want to climb it. He had to. Each step groaned beneath his weight. The attic was freezing. Dust floated in the air like snow. And then he saw it. A single paw print in the middle of the wooden floor, wet, crimson, pulsing faintly. Behind it, a series of scratches circling around something invisible. In the far corner, a broken mirror lay on its side. Etched into the glass, barely visible, were words, "One of you must die." Ethan stumbled back. His foot caught on a loose board. Crash! The noise exploded through the attic. And something moved in the shadows. Scree, scree, plonk! A piano chord faint, distorted like from a broken toy. He ran. Clara's house was dark when he arrived. He knocked once. No answer. Twice. Nothing. Then came a scream from within. A shrill, desperate, tearing scream that cracked the night in half. He kicked the door open and sprinted upstairs. In her bedroom, Clara sat in the corner, curled into herself, shaking violently. Across from her stood the cat. No longer small. It had grown. Its limbs were too long now, and its face was stretched, distended, as if wearing the mask of a cat. Its red eyes flickered like candles in the wind. Ethan raised the bat. The cat blinked and vanished. Just like that, Clara let out a choking sob. Ethan knelt beside her. "I saw it. I saw its real face," she gasped. "It's not a cat. It's something else wearing a shape. It was waiting for me in the mirror, Ethan. It said—" She hesitated. "What?" She looked up at him, eyes wide. "It said your name." Chapter 5. Nocturne Scratches. It started with a single note, a hollow, hesitant plink from the depths of midnight, as if someone had pressed the lowest key on a piano and held it there, daring the silence to swallow it whole. Ethan sat upright in bed, heart thudding. The sound had come from downstairs. Again, plink. Longer this time. Clearer. The old piano in the living room hadn't been played in years. Not since his mother's hands started trembling from something the doctors couldn't explain. Plink, plink, plonk. Each key pressed with deliberate space between them, like a song trying to remember itself. He rose slowly, stepping onto the cold floorboards, the air thick with something sour dust, damp, and the metallic sting of fear. He crept toward his door, cracking it open just enough to peek into the dark hallway. The piano continued, no longer hesitant, but flowing now. Music. A melody. A nocturne. Haunting, melancholic, and deeply wrong. Not just because no one was playing it, but because no human could have played it like that. Notes that should not fit together did, dissonant yet beautiful in a way that twisted the stomach. As he descended the stairs, the sounds grew clearer. Plink, plink, plonk, ting. The tempo slowed. Then the melody changed almost playfully. Then suddenly, scrape! A harsh, dragging sound cut through the air, loud enough to make him stumble on the bottom step. It was like claws raked across wood, long and splintering. He turned the corner and froze. The piano's lid was wide open. Keys were moving on their own, pressing down, one after the other. Shadows slithered across the walls, though no lights flickered. And sitting on top of the piano, tail curled, eyes like molten embers, was the tat. The same one, except larger now. Its fur shimmered oddly, like it wasn't quite part of this world. Its mouth didn't move, but Ethan heard it, a whisper as though it was right behind him. "Do you like my song, Ethan?" He stumbled back, breath caught in his throat. The music stopped. The cat blinked slowly. Screak! Thud! The lid of the piano slammed shut by itself, making the walls tremble. When Ethan looked back up, the cat was gone. The next morning, Clara arrived with more pages from her grandmother's journal. "You heard it, didn't you?" she asked before Ethan could speak. "The piano," he said. "It was playing by itself. And the cat, it was on top of it." Clara unrolled a brittle sheet of parchment and laid it out on Ethan's desk. When the crimson eye sits atop the altar of sound, the veil grows thin. The melody is its bridge and the scratching its true voice. Beneath the words was a crude sketch, a black cat seated on a grand piano, surrounded by what looked like hundreds of shadowy hands reaching from the floor. "I think the music lets it in," Clara said. "It's not just haunting us, it's opening something." Ethan felt sick. "It's using sound. The piano is a door. And the scratches," Clara added, "they're messages, warnings, or maybe even commands." That evening, Ethan couldn't sleep. The silence in his house was too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. He turned over, facing the window. There, in the faint glow of the street lamp, he saw it. Scratches, dozens of them, etched into the glass from the inside. He bolted upright. The scratches formed letters, words. "Let me in." He backed away slowly, heart slamming against his ribs. The scratching sound began again, this time from the ceiling. Scree, scree, scree. He ran to his parents' room, but they didn't wake. No matter how hard he shook them, no matter how loud he screamed, they didn't stir, like they were frozen. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, came the music again, the nocturne. Ethan turned to Clara, who had followed him, her face drained of color. "Why can't they wake up?" he cried. "I think the music, it's putting them to sleep, everyone." She pointed out the window. Across the street, lights flickered in one house, then another, then nothing. The entire block went dark, and from every shadowed corner came the sound. Scratching. The next day, news spread fast. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, a couple in their 60s, were found dead in their beds, eyes open, mouths agape. The strangest part, their hands were resting on an old phonograph. The needle had been placed on a warped, dust-covered vinyl labeled "Nocturne in Crimson." The authorities blamed a faulty gas heater. No one in the village believed it. That night, Ethan and Clara listened to the old recording just once. The melody was the same as what the cat had played, and layered underneath, almost imperceptibly, were sounds not meant to be heard. The click of claws on hardwood, the dragging of nails down stone, and behind it all, voices. You heard us. You see us. You belong to us. Clara turned it off. We need to destroy the piano, she whispered. Ethan nodded. And the record. But what if it's not enough? They returned to Ethan's house after midnight. The moment they stepped inside, the piano began playing on its own. Plink, 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 like it knew. Clara stepped forward, gripping a hammer. Stay behind me. She raised it high, but before she could swing, the keys all slammed down at once, letting out a discordant, violent blang that knocked both of them backward. The room plunged into darkness, and then the scratching began. Not from one direction, but everywhere. From the ceiling, the walls, the floorboards. Scree, 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 scree! The sound was maddening multiplied, like claws raking across every surface of reality. Clara screamed. The room twisted, the shadows pulsing like something alive. And then the piano exploded, not with fire, but with sound. A thunderous, echoing boom that shook the entire house and sent splinters flying like shrapnel. And sitting amidst the wreckage, unharmed and composed, was the cat. Its eyes no longer just crimson, but burning like molten suns. It opened its mouth, and what came out was not a meow. It was a chorus of voices, all speaking at once. The fourth has fallen. The door is open. And then everything went black. Chapter 6. The photo that shouldn't exist. The house was silent. Too silent. After the explosion of the piano, after the scratching stopped, after the creature with molten eyes spoke, everything fell still. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Ethan lay dazed on the floor, slivers of wood embedded in his arm, the scent of smoke and old varnish thick in his nostrils. Clara knelt beside him, her lips moving, but he couldn't hear her, not at first. All he could hear was a high-pitched ringing, shrill, constant, like the aftermath of a bomb. Then, slowly, sound returned. First the creaking of broken floorboards, then Clara's trembling voice. "Ethan, Ethan, get up!" He sat up, blinking at the room, or what remained of it. The piano was nothing more than splinters and strings. The windows were shattered inward, though no glass had fallen outside. And the cat was gone. Not vanished into shadows this time, just gone, as if it had never been there. Except for one thing. On top of the wreckage, resting neatly where the cat had sat, was a photograph, a fresh one, its edges curled slightly, the paper still warm. Clara picked it up carefully. Her breath caught in her throat. Oh my God! The photo was from the third funeral Gordon Wills. It showed the mourners gathered at the cemetery, umbrellas raised against the drizzle, faces downturned. But in the background, atop Gordon's headstone was a figure no one remembered seeing. A cat, tall, black, eyes glowing red, even in daylight. The image was perfectly clear. too clear. Ethan stared at it, cold sweat forming on his neck. That wasn't in the original photo. Clara shook her head. I was there. I would have seen it. They rushed to her house, where her aunt, a local photographer, had been the one to take the picture. Clara threw the photo down on the table. Do you remember this? Her aunt peered at it. Of course, I took that shot myself. Wait, is this? Her eyes narrowed. No, that can't be. I reviewed every photo. There was no cat. She rummaged through her laptop, opening the original files. The same photo loaded. No cat. The two images were identical in every way, except one. The second one had the cat. And the timestamp on both? Exactly the same. Later that night, Ethan sat in his room, staring at the second photo. The cat wasn't just watching. Its head was slightly turned, eyes fixed directly on the camera. No, not the camera. The person holding it. Clara's aunt. He called her. There was no answer. He and Clara rushed back to her house. The lights were off. The front door open. Inside, the air was still. The kind of stillness that buzzed in the ears. Then they heard it. A soft, rhythmic clicking, like claws against tile. Click, click, click. They followed the sound through the hallway into the dark room. The red safety light pulsed slowly. In the center of the room stood the photo printer. The tray held another freshly developed image. Ethan picked it up. This one was inside the chapel, taken from the back pew, but neither of them had taken it. And in the front row, seated among the mourners, was the cat, smaller now, almost kitten-sized, but its eyes were unmistakable. Clara backed away. It's changing! Ethan turned to the door. That's when they saw the writing. Scrawled across the wall in black ink or blood were the words, "Every picture is a window." Clara's aunt was found the next morning, in her bedroom, camera clutched to her chest. Her eyes were wide open, pupils dilated, mouth agape in silent horror. No wounds, no signs of struggle. Just a final photograph, still inside the camera. Ethan and Clara viewed it together, trembling. It was a close-up shot. The cat's face, filling the entire frame. Red eyes, bleeding at the edges. Its mouth open in a silent scream. Behind it, faces, human faces, all screaming, all faceless. That night, the whispers came again. Ethan woke to the sound of the photo printer activating by itself. Whir, click, whir. He rushed to it, heart pounding. One photograph slid out, then another, then another. All of them showed the same scene from different angles. His bedroom. But he hadn't taken any of them. In the last image, he was asleep in bed and the cat stood beside him on the pillow, looking down at him, its paw raised. Ethan let out a choked cry and threw the photos across the room. Then he heard it, a slow, deliberate scratching. From inside the wall, "Scree, scree, scree!" He pressed his ear to it, and through the plaster he heard purring. Not soft, not comforting, deep, menacing, predatory. Clara called seconds later. "There's a photo of me on my window, taped from the outside." Her voice shook. "It's me, sleeping, and it's taken from inside my room." The next morning, the village woke to find photos taped to their front doors. Each one different, each one impossible. One showed a man's backyard with the cat lying beside a freshly dug grave. Another showed a child's crib with glowing red eyes peering out from underneath. Some residents left town that very day. Those who stayed locked their windows, burned the photos. But they always came back, clean, undamaged, waiting on the doorstep each morning. Ethan and Clara made a decision. They burned every camera in both their houses. They smashed the printers. They tore every photo they could find into shreds. But that night, the walls whispered something new. You cannot destroy the door once it's open. And from the attic came the slow dragging sound again. Not claws this time. Something heavier. Something being pulled across the floor. Ethan climbed the stairs, Clara behind him. They reached the attic. The smell hit them first, charred wood, old blood, and something acidic. The room was filled with photographs, hundreds, thousands, pinned to every wall, hanging from strings, covering the floor. All of them showing the cat, watching, approaching, changing, becoming. In the center of the room sat a single Polaroid camera, still warm, still ticking. And beneath it, scrawled into the floorboards with claw marks, "Take the picture or be part of it." Chapter 7. The Boy Who Fed the Cat. The story had been buried, not by time, but by fear, the kind of fear that lives in the bones of a town, passed silently from one generation to the next. There were no records, no official statements, just a whispered name, half remembered behind closed doors. Benjamin Knox. Ethan first heard it from an old man sitting alone at the corner table of the village cafe, his knotted hands trembling around a chipped mug. "You're the one asking about the cat," he rasped. "Should have stopped. Should have never looked it in the eyes." Ethan leaned closer. "You know something, don't you?" The man's gaze flicked toward the fog-covered window. "I don't know it," he said, "but I remember the boy who thought he did." He didn't say much after that, just 2 words before falling into silence. Ben Knox. Back at the house, Ethan dug into the village's school archives. And there it was, Benjamin Knox, age 10, disappeared 15 years ago. Last seen on his way home from the corner market. No trace ever found. No body. Just his little red bike. Lying sideways on the edge of Briarwood Trail, tires still spinning. But there was something else. A scanned copy of his last drawing, submitted for a class project. Ethan stared at it. A child's scrawl, shaky lines, bright crayons. A black cat with enormous red eyes. Underneath it, in shaky cursive, "His name is Whisper. He only eats what I give him." Clara, peering over Ethan's shoulder, whispered, "He named it?" Ethan nodded slowly. He thought it was his friend. They needed answers. And there was only one place they hadn't dared to search. Briarwood Trail. The path wound behind the oldest part of Greystone Hollow, where trees leaned too close and the earth always felt wet, even in summer. Birds didn't sing there. The wind didn't move, only silence, deep, oppressive waiting. They set off just before dusk. The forest greeted them with a long, low groan, the sound of bark twisting, as though the trees were waking from an unnatural sleep. Creak! Clara clutched the flashlight tighter. Why here? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. They reached the clearing where Ben's bike had been found. Nothing remained. No tire tracks, no bones, just an old bench nearly swallowed by moss. And a dead tree stump that looked more like a gnarled claw reaching from the dirt. Then the air shifted. A soft meow echoed from behind them, playful, almost innocent. Meow! Meow! They spun around. Nothing. Then scratching. Scree, scree, scree. Not on wood, not on stone, on flesh. Clara let out a strangled cry and dropped the flashlight. Its beam landed on the tree stump. Clawed into its base were dozens of names, faded, some almost gone, but one still visible. Benjamin Knox, and beneath it, a single word etched deeper than the rest. Mine. The air grew thick. The light dimmed, though the sun hadn't yet set. And then they heard it. Not a meow, not a whisper. A laugh. High-pitched, childlike, and wrong. They fled. Branches clawed at their faces as they stumbled back to the village, the sound of footsteps soft and four-legged padding behind them the entire way. Never rushing, never growling, just following, always just out of sight. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, studying Ben's drawing. There was something strange about it now. A detail he hadn't noticed before. The cat's tail. It wasn't curled like a regular feline's. It was forked like a serpent's tongue. He turned the drawing over. On the back, in faded pencil, he said if I feed him one more time, I can go with him. Ethan's breath hitched. The door to his room creaked. Creak! He turned, heart slamming in his chest. No one there. But the floorboards creaked again, one after another, as if something invisible crept across the room. Then, clink! A small object dropped onto his desk from nowhere. A child's tin lunchbox. The lid slowly opened with a metallic squeal. Inside was a half-eaten sandwich, rotten, moldy, and beneath it, another drawing. Ben's handwriting again. He likes peanut butter. He says red makes it better. There was a splotch on the paper, dark, wet. Not peanut butter. Clara called just before 3 a.m. Her voice was shaking. There's something outside my house. Ethan ran. The street was deserted. Cold fog blanketed the ground. He reached her porch. On the welcome mat was a paper plate with a single strip of raw meat on it. Next to it, a drawing. This time, it wasn't Ben's. It was Clara, depicted in crayon, sitting on the ground next to the cat. Her eyes were missing. 2 black X's in their place. And beneath, in red, she fed me too. They burned the drawing, but the wind howled through the chimney as they did, carrying with it a new sound, a voice, childlike. I'm still hungry. The next day, Ethan visited the oldest resident of Greystone Hollow, Miss Audrey Temple, 91, sharp as glass and twice as cold. She hadn't spoken to anyone in years, until he showed her the drawing. Her eyes widened, her hands trembled, and she said only this: "That boy, Benjamin, he wasn't the first." Then she began to hum, a tune Ethan had heard before, a nocturne, off-key, sinister, almost like the one the piano had played that night. A new name appeared on the wall of Ethan's attic, freshly scratched, Clara Wells, and beneath it, in smaller letters, "Feed or be fed." Chapter 8. The Witch's House at the End of the Street. Every town has a place it pretends doesn't exist. In Greystone Hollow, that place was the crumbling, ivy-choked house at the end of Ashmore Lane, where the pavement cracked into wild roots and the streetlights refused to shine. Children dared each other to throw rocks at its boarded-up windows. Teenagers whispered about curses and strange lights. Adults lowered their voices when walking past. They called it the Witch's House. No one had seen the woman who lived there in nearly 20 years. Some said she was blind. Others said she died long ago, but the house refused to admit it. But after the name Benjamin Knox, after the photos, the scratching, the meal left on Clara's porch, and the name Clara Wells etched into Ethan's attic wall, there was no one else to turn to. If anyone knew what the cat truly was, it would be her. The gate creaked open like a jaw unhinging. Cree-ha! Ethan and Clara stepped into the garden, if it could still be called that. Wild vines curled like fingers around the remnants of a rusted swing set. Bird baths were filled not with water, but with bones, small ones, cracked and weathered. Clara gripped his arm. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" "No," Ethan replied. "But we've run out of good ideas." The front door stood slightly ajar. They pushed it open. A deep groan echoed through the house, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. The air was thick with incense and mildew. Faded wallpaper peeled like shedding skin. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling, brushing their heads with every step. Then, from the darkness came a voice, dry, gravelly, unmistakably alive. "Close the door, or it'll follow." She sat at the far end of the room in a high-backed chair, surrounded by candles that burned blue. Her face was a map of age and shadows. One eye was clouded white, the other sharp as flint. Her fingers moved constantly, knotting thread, twisting twine, braiding something that looked suspiciously like human hair. Clara stepped forward. "Are you Miss Morwenna?" The old woman nodded once. "You've seen it." Ethan swallowed. "The cat, with the red eyes." Miss Morwenna's hands stopped moving. "It's not a cat," she said. "It just wears the skin of one." The silence that followed felt like a scream waiting to happen. She motioned to the fire. "Sit and listen carefully." "I don't speak twice." They obeyed. The fire cracked and hissed like it was trying to whisper over her. A long time ago, before Greystone was hollow, the land belonged to something else. Not human, not animal. A hunger in the shape of a question. A family built their home on its resting place, not knowing the ground beneath was cursed. They brought a child into the world, a boy with black eyes and a voice that never cried. On the night of his 7th birthday, the child disappeared. In his place, they found a cat, red-eyed, silent, watching. They buried it. It came back. They burned it. It returned. So they made a deal. Ethan leaned forward. What kind of deal? Morwenna's eye locked on his. A door in exchange for protection. Every generation, it must be fed. A name written, a soul given. Clara whispered, Benjamin Knox. Morwenna nodded slowly. They didn't choose him. He offered, thought he could befriend the beast. But it doesn't understand love, only hunger. The same hunger that now has your scent. She turned her gaze to Clara. You were marked the moment you spoke its name aloud. You made it real. Now it's real enough. Outside, the wind picked up. Then, thud. Something heavy hit the porch. Thud, thud, thud. Claws dragged across the front door. Scree! And candles flickered. The blue flames turned red. Clara rose from her seat, panicked. It's here! Morwenna didn't move. You brought it with you. Ethan grabbed Clara's hand. We need to go! Wait, Morwenna snarled. There's one more thing. She tossed him a bundle wrapped in linen. Inside, bones, a fragment of mirror, and a small vial of something blacker than ink. Blood of the first marked, she said. If it reaches the 9th name, the door opens fully, and there'll be no closing it. What do we do with this? Ethan cried as the walls began to tremble. Morwenna looked at them, sadness flickering in her eye. Run. They burst out of the house into the fog-drenched night. Something chased them. They didn't look back, couldn't. The sounds behind them were too horrible. Sss, clink, click, clack. Meow! A sound that no cat should make. Part scream, part laugh, all wrong. Clara stumbled, falling to her knees. Ethan pulled her up. The fog grew thicker. Shapes moved within it, crawling, slithering, dragging themselves through the mist. The red eyes blinked into existence around them. 1, 2, 9. The ground pulsed beneath their feet. A distant bell began to toll, though the chapel was miles away. Dong, dong, dong. Ethan screamed into the void. We didn't write the names! A voice echoed in his head. You didn't have to. They made it back to Clara's house just as the last bell tolled. The moment the door slammed shut, everything stopped. No fog, no scratching, no eyes, just silence. Clara sank to the floor, sobbing. Ethan opened the linen bundle again. The vial glowed faintly now, reacting to something unseen. And the mirror shard? It reflected not their faces, but someone else behind them. A small boy, wearing a red coat, holding a cat, smiling. Chapter 9. The Night of Crimson Rain. It began at 12:06 a.m. One raindrop, then another, then 100. But it wasn't water, it was red. The first drop hit Ethan's windowsill with a soft plink, thick as syrup. A dark smear trailed down the glass like a slow tear. More followed, spattering the roof with a strange, sickening rhythm. Plip, plop, plip. At first, he thought it was rust, but when he stepped out onto the porch, the wind carrying the heavy scent of iron, he knew. Blood. It rained blood. Above, the clouds churned like boiling ink. Thunder rumbled, not sharp cracks, but deep guttural groans, like something massive shifting just beyond the sky. Ethan stood frozen, breath visible in the sudden chill, watching the red rain smear across the wooden floorboards. Behind him, Clara whispered, "It's starting." By morning, the town was coated in crimson. The streets ran slick and sticky, gutters overflowing with red-tinted runoff. Lawns were drenched in it. And clothing hung out to dry now dripped like butchered cloth. Windows streaked with blood blurred the world into something unreal, a fever dream of rust and rain. People panicked. Phones rang off the hook. The local news had no explanation. The mayor claimed a chemical spill, but no one believed it. And then the bodies appeared. One by one, laid out neatly on porches, at the foot of beds, beneath trees. Not people, cats, all black, all dead. But their eyes, every last one, had been torn out. Ethan and Clara moved through the village like shadows. No one spoke to them. Eyes followed. Doors closed. Greystone Hollow had become a place of silence, only broken by the endless, wet slapping of red rain on rooftops. Plap, plap, plap. Every drop sounded heavier now, hungrier. At Miss Morwenna's house, they found a door ajar. Inside, candles still burned, but she was gone. The chair where she'd once sat now bore a black scorch mark. On the wall above it, someone or something had painted with the blood-red rain. 6 have been claimed. Below that, the 7th is chosen. Clara turned to Ethan slowly. Her voice cracked. "Who's the 7th?" Back at Ethan's home, the vial Morwenna gave them was glowing brighter. And the mirror shard? It showed Clara now not as she was, reflected wrong. Her eyes glowed faintly. Her mouth was smiling in the reflection, though she wasn't smiling at all. She turned away from it. "I don't want to look anymore." Ethan didn't tell her that her shadow moved out of sync with her body. That night, the storm came. Not wind, not thunder. Something beneath the earth began to move. The floors trembled. The trees bent inward. And from beneath the village came a sound like the moan of buried giants. Every house in Greystone Hollow groaned. Windows cracked. Walls shifted. And through it all, the scratching returned. Only now, it wasn't isolated. It came from everywhere. Scree, scree, scree! Under the beds, behind the mirrors, inside drawers, beneath floorboards. And above it all, rising through the sound like a twisted lullaby, came the melody, the nocturne, playing from nowhere, from everywhere. Plink, plink, plonk. Ethan collapsed to the floor, covering his ears. "Make it stop!" But Clara just stood there frozen, lips parted, as if hearing a voice no one else could. Then she spoke. But it wasn't her voice. It was younger, higher, familiar. It was Benjamin Knox. "They said I could stay if I fed it, but it never said what happens when it gets full." Ethan backed away. "Clara? Clara?" Her eyes rolled back, and the cat appeared in the hallway. No longer walking, it floated. Its form blurred at the edges, flickering like static, its mouth open too wide, too human, and it spoke, not in whispers, not in thought, but aloud. A voice like many voices, children, old men, women sobbing, things hissing, all twisted into one. The 8th approaches. Then came the knocking. 3 slow, hollow bangs at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Each one made the lights flicker. The blood on the windows rippled. Ethan grabbed Clara's shoulders. "We have to go, now." She blinked. Awareness returning. Where? He didn't know, but staying meant death, or worse. They fled into the storm. The village was unrecognizable. Crimson poured from rooftops. The air vibrated with unseen screams. Street signs spun, windless, and in every puddle, reflections that didn't match reality. Children with sewn mouths, cats with human eyes, Ethan grinning with fangs he didn't possess. They ran until they reached the edge of town where the trees began, where the first boy disappeared. Briarwood Trail, and there in the clearing stood the boy in the red coat. Benjamin, alive, or something wearing his face. He held out a hand to Clara. "She's the 9th," he said. Then the door opens. Chapter 10. 9 Lives, 1 Curse. Briarwood Trail had never been quiet. Even before the storm, before the disappearances, before the blood rain, the trees always whispered, the air always shifted wrong. But now, on this night, the 9th night, there was no whisper, only breathless stillness. The boy in the red coat stood at the center of the clearing, hand outstretched, eyes dark as polished stone. And Clara, pale, trembling, drawn to him like a moth to fire, took one uncertain step forward. "No," Ethan said, grabbing her wrist. "Don't." "He's not real," Clara whispered, as if in a trance. "He's a memory." "No, he's a mask." Under cracked overhead, not a typical boom, but a screaming tear like the sky was being ripped apart. Rawr! Crag! The trees shook violently. Redding began again, redder than before, heavier. It fell in splashes that hissed against the earth like acid on flesh. And then came the low growl, a sound that wasn't just heard, it was felt, a vibration deep in Ethan's spine. The clearing darkened, and from the shadows beyond the tree line, it emerged. Not the cat, not anymore. It had grown, stretched, unhinged, unnatural, still vaguely feline in posture, but elongated, like a shadow wearing the shape of a beast. Its fur dripped with something darker than blood. Its tail split in two, ending in jagged barbs, and its eyes no longer just red. They were burning orbs, like molten suns, cracking and flaring with each breath. It opened its mouth. From within came voices too many to count, some human, some not, all whispering the same word. 9. Clara fell to her knees. "It's me," she sobbed. "I'm the 9th. That's why it's here. That's why it's been feeding." "No." Ethan knelt beside her. "There's another way. Morwenna said something about the blood of the first marked. It's still with us." He pulled the vial from his coat. The black liquid inside boiled. Then Without warning, scream! The beast let out a shriek so sharp, so soul-wrenching, that Ethan dropped the vial. It hit the ground and shattered. The earth drank the black fluid. The sky screamed again. Then came the wind. Whoom! The trees bent backward. The red rain flew sideways. And in the center of the clearing, a circle of scorched grass erupted into flame. And the creature, the cat that wasn't a cat, screamed again, but this time in pain. It staggered, its body warped and trembled. And then from all around came the wailing, children crying, laughing, screaming. And one voice louder than the rest, Benjamin Knox. "I didn't know it was a trap. I just wanted to feed it. I didn't know feeding meant giving. And once you give, it never lets go." The ghost of Benjamin stood behind the creature now. Then another boy, and another. 9, all with black mouths and empty sockets where eyes had once been. They stepped forward. The creature hissed. Crack! Lightning struck a tree just inches from Ethan, splitting it in half. The ghosts ignored it. They began to circle the beast, and it panicked. It turned to Clara, and it spoke aloud, voice like 1,000 whispers grinding on steel. "Offer her, and live, or deny, and die." Clara looked at Ethan. "If I go, will it stop?" Ethan shook his head. "No, it never stops. It just starts again." She reached into her pocket the mirror shard Morwenna had given them. "I see it now," Clara whispered. "It doesn't feed on people. It feeds on belief." She stood, holding the shard between herself and the beast. "You want a door?" Her voice grew stronger. "You want a name?" She pressed the shard into her palm. Blood welled. "Then take mine. But you'll never wear it again." The shard flashed. The ghosts screamed. The creature lunged. Boom! A wave of light burst from the center of the circle. Everything went white. When Ethan woke, the clearing was silent again. The rain had stopped. The trees no longer bent. The air no longer hissed. And the cat or the creature was gone. Clara lay beside him, breathing, alive. The shard was in her hand, now dull. The ground where the beast had stood was scorched black. In the center, a single word etched into the dirt. Enough. Days passed, then weeks. The village began to mend. The blood rain never returned. The photos disappeared. The scratching faded. Ethan and Clara never spoke about what happened to anyone. Some things weren't meant to be retold, but every so often, when the wind turned wrong and the night was too quiet, they'd hear it, a single note, far away, plink, like a forgotten piano key being pressed by a phantom hand. And in the mirror, just for a second, a flicker of red eyes, watching, waiting.